Oh look, a new Superman origin story. Does it do anything spectacularly different from the last one? No. Does it really set itself apart by doing something big and dynamic with the character? No. Then why is it happening? Oh, because Frank Miller wanted to tell his own. Well, isn't that just... Hello, citizens of the multiverse, and welcome to Comics Insider, the show where we break down and discuss some of the biggest comics that came out this week. Now, of course, barring my shirt today, we're going to be discussing Frank Miller and John Romita Jr.'s Superman Year 1 from the DC Black Label line. It's a book that I think a lot of people have been waiting for, whether or not it was to enjoy or to brutally maim. But nevertheless, people have been looking forward to checking out this book, and we finally get another oversized Black Label book, which is something that I think I was excited about. You know, it's that full prestige format, and as much as I loved Batman Last Night on Earth, I wish we did get a little bit of that art space, but I digress. Nevertheless, please make sure to stay around till the end of the video to learn how to win a free digital copy of a comic book. It's all thanks to AJ's Comics. But with all that out of the way, let's get into Superman Year 1 by Frank Miller, John Romita Jr., Danny Miki, and Alex Sinclair. So this origin story pretty much opens up as we'd expect at the destruction of Krypton. Now, of course, Jor-El and Lara are rushing baby Kal-El to the rocket frantically as the planet Krypton is crumbling around them. And so we follow baby Kal-El as he's sent to Earth on the rocket with some really nice, kind of poetic narration at the perspective of a baby kind of rocketing towards another planet. And I also think that there's a little bit of like a recorded message from Jor-El and the rocket. It's just pretty nicely woven together. But of course, our young and infant hero emerges in Smallville, Kansas, within some sort of cornfield and found by Jonathan Kent. And so we end up following Clark Kent throughout his infancy into his adolescence, showing him learn, what he can truly do, what he's capable of, and how to restrain himself and keep himself contained. In this story, Jonathan and Martha Kent are kind of simple folk, but they still instill within Clark the values and morals that, would eventually permeate his entire existence as Superman in the future. But our main narrative kind of resumes during Clark's first day of high school. Clark ends up using his powers to help out a friend of his who can't fit into a space helmet for a lesson on astronomy. And what this shows for me is, well, Clark really for the first time doing the right thing without having a reason to do it. And throughout Clark's time in high school, we watch him in this book kind of using that mechanism of morality that the Kents have instilled within him just to operate and be who he is. Later that day at Clark's lunch, we're briefly introduced to his love interest, Lana Lang, and that'll kind of come in a little bit later. But even farther after that, Clark's dear friend Pete Ross is a victim of relentless bullying, and so really are the rest of his friends, who are kind of labeled weirdos by their assailants. And there's a heavy focus on the bullies throughout this book, and especially here, they really become the first real test to Clark in his life. And, Clark really here is learning to walk that fine line from personal experience. And at some point, he has enough and confronts the bullies. They end up trying to assault him. All he's trying to do is sit down and talk to them. But of course, he ends up deflecting their blows and wiping the floor with them. All the while, he's consciously again reminding himself to show that restraint, because otherwise he'd be able to throw him through walls upon walls. Clark is eventually reprimanded at the school and arrives home to have a really great heartfelt talk with his father. And this is where we get the first real instance of Clark being taught both sides of restraint, right? So while being able to keep yourself under control is important, he also reminds Clark not to be anybody's doormat. And I think this for Clark is the first instance where he learns that being kind to others is important, but you can't let them take your kindness for granted. Clark returns to school the next day only to learn that the bullies have taken their anger at him out on his friends, and they're more relentless than ever. Lana Lang ends up approaching Clark, saying that she has photos of all these bullies doing their dastardly deeds and assaulting people, and that she's willing to show the photos to the police. And so they agree to meet at Lana's house later that evening, And later that evening, Lana arrives to the rendezvous point only to be tricked by the bullies as they assault her. And it gets into some pretty adult content here, which is probably the most quote-unquote inappropriate thing to happen in this book. They allude to the fact that they're going to rape her. And what gets me here is that although she's seen Clark within the last few hours, she gets tricked by the bully's voice, kind of trying to convince herself that it was a cold, but like, seriously? Anyways, of course Clark comes to save the day and rescues Lana Lang, ends up swatting off Markham and the boys, and they're all fairly injured. There's a bit of really bad dialogue here, to be honest, that we'll probably talk about later. But what's supposed to be special here is that he has his first flight carrying Lana Lang back to her house. And I'm kind of disappointed in it. There was some decent narration kind of being juxtaposed over the scene, but really visually it didn't do anything for me. The moment didn't feel as momentous and as important as I feel like it should have. But moving forward, a few years pass as Clark flies through high school and his relationship with Lana Lang flourishes. As Clark has matured, he's really taken the lessons that his father has been trying to teach him to heart and realizes that there's a lot of good that he can be doing, and he shouldn't just limit it to Smallville, Kansas, that he should be able to bring that to the world. But not only that, learn more about the world that he's trying to help. And so he enlists into the Navy. And really this book just closes with him giving his farewells and goodbyes to both his parents and Lana, and a little bit of the experience of him on the bus. And that's really where this issue closes out. And so at the end of the day, the one question I had to ask myself was, what did this new origin really accomplish? And the answer is not much. It felt really run-of-the-mill story-wise. You know, we follow a young Clark experiencing his early life in Smallville, Kansas, and we watch him at least a little bit grow into the person that he becomes, and eventually, you know, this will lead way to him becoming Superman. And of course we got a decent perspective into following Clark and how he builds those traits and morals through, you know, his time in Smallville. But at the end of the day, it just didn't feel profound. Miller isn't exactly doing anything special here. It just kind of does the bare minimum that it needs to tell us, okay, Clark is an independent, free-thinking person that takes the lessons that he learns to heart, which is great. But is it anything spectacular? No. Should we be lauding Frank Miller for doing the most basic of things in this story? No, not really. One other gripe, and I guess this is just semantics, this book is supposed to be Superman Year 1. Book 1 alone takes place over 18 years. So how is this a year 1? I mean, I understand that the words year 1 have become synonymous with origin story, but year 1 usually happens over the course of a year. So I thought that this was a pretty stale attempt to use the year 1 term and capture the marketing weight of it. Kind of disappointed. At first, the dialogue was pretty intelligent, and it finds a somewhat poetic way to describe some of the things that young Clark is experiencing on Earth, and even in space beforehand. But then it just gets really confused, and you might be thinking, well, like, oh, bad grammar, confusing. No, like, the narration kind of begins to confuse itself, and it goes from being like this third-person omniscient narrator to then being, you know, Clark firsthand to being one of the Kents firsthand, and it doesn't really seem to have a concise voice, which is really bothersome. And I know it's not uncommon, right, for comics to have internal monologue and narration, but there was nothing here that really told us that we were switching from internal monologue to narration. In fact, it just, again, felt like one confused narrative speaker. Eventually, that kind of poetic description that the narration used just ends up feeling like they're trying to be poetic for poetic's sake and not actually having a purpose to fulfill. And that kind of gets upsetting just watching it as a writer. It begins to take away the value of the earlier narration with the solid use of poetic language. I will give this book that Miller did have a solid characterization of Clark, and we get to watch him grow up, and we get to watch the character show his morals and his understandings of the lessons that have kind of passed by throughout his life, which was cool. But, like, it also wasn't anything superb. It was just like, okay, you're writing a Superman book. Does it feel like Clark Kent's Superman? Yeah, it does. But it doesn't really do anything superbly different. You know, it's not like, again, Jeff Johns and his Secret Origin, or Mark Waid when he writes Superman, or even Tomasi if we're going to bring up recent runs. There's just nothing really special about it. I mean, just looking at the writing as a whole, it felt a little bit confused. Again, the narration was kind of confusing. There was a lot of bad dialogue in this book. I mean, I'll show up a couple instances here, but there were moments where he would have characters repeat whatever point they were trying to get at multiple times, and it's like, dude, we just don't need it. Like, we get it. We get what the characters are saying. I don't need you to fill up more of the page space. And speaking of page space, there was a lot of just unnecessary narration. You know, like, let the artist do their job. I get it, like, you want to describe the scene, and at times it can be really, really great and really, really amp up the emotions and the images that you're trying to evoke. But, like, other times, you're just covering the artwork, and it just feels pointless to me. But in regards to other dialogue, there were just moments where you're like, do real people talk like this? And I've heard a lot of people say, well, this book takes place in the 40s. Are you so sure? Because throughout the book, if you pay attention, all of the characters have modern clothes. I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't care where you are in the United States. Some of that just didn't feel like real people talking. And I know I'm ranking on this, but at the end of the day, it was all right. Like, it wasn't, for me, something that should be part of the Black Label banner. You know, when I think Black Label, obviously I think artistic, top-tier creators telling these big stories that really get to flex their ability as people in the industry, and this did not feel like that. It just felt boring and run-of-the-mill, and frankly, if I'm gonna get another origin story, I want it to be damn good. And so I'm gonna judge it even harder, because we've had enough origins. We've had plenty of great origins. So why did I need to pay $8 for this one? Art-wise, it's John Romita Jr. It's some of the best John Romita Jr.'s ever been. And so cool, it's fine, it's serviceable in many points. If you really get into it, some of the perspectives felt really off. You know, there's a scene with Clark and his father on the field, and like Clark just looks tiny, but he's supposed to be 18 years old. Obviously, anatomy is an issue. At points, you know, young Clark's head is bigger than the rest of his body. As good as it was for Romita, it did have a lot of John Romita Jr.'s shortcomings that you've seen throughout most of his art. I think that a lot of the more aesthetically appealing visuals come from the colors and the inks. Alex Sinclair uses a beautifully vibrant color palette in this issue, and it helps to get everything to pop off the page. And of course, Danny Miki does what he can to kind of clean up John Romita Jr.'s pencils, but at the end of the day, you know, there are problems visually with comics in general nowadays, but especially with Black Label. I kind of come to expect some really interesting and innovative page layouts and panel compositions, but you don't get that at all in this book. The visual narrative is fine. It's you know, really run-of-the-mill, but there is nothing about this comic, looking at it now, that really feel fluid. You know, for me, and I've said this on my last couple of videos, the best comics are the ones that feel like you're in a film. They feel like these panels could be moving, and it has a certain level of kinetics to going through, and this just doesn't have it. Like, you know this is a comic book, and it's there, it's solid, but it's also really flat and doesn't feel like we're going anywhere visually. So if I'm gonna be 100% honest with you, I'm gonna give this book like a 6.5 out of 10, and you know, it's fine, it's all right, but frankly, again, we're getting an origin story, Black Label title. I would skip out on it, man. If I were to tell you to do anything, I would say pass. For $8, I don't think it's worth it. I don't think you're getting any intense story. Maybe, yeah, you're getting 64 pages of value for an $8 book, but to be honest, I would just say go spend your money on a better Superman origin story. The paper feels good in hand, but at the end of the day, I'm buying this for the story and the art. As far as I'm concerned, this is DC Black Label's first real shot in the dark. This was not a great book. I know a lot of people are going to ream me for maybe being too analytical at times, but That's just what it is. But now that we've gotten to the end of this conversation, I do want to give you guys a free chance to win a digital copy of Shazam #1. How is this related? Well, it's not. But it's a Superman analog, and that issue 1's better than this issue 1. Not to mention the series has been really great so far. But if you want to make sure you can enter to win a free digital copy of the book, all you have to do is make sure that you're a subscriber of the channel, you like this video, and you comment down below answering the question of the day, letting me know, were you excited for the Superman Year 1? And do you see yourself picking it up? If you have picked it up, what are your thoughts on it? I'm really curious to see if I'm the only one, that was disappointed in the issue. So let me know down there. And of course, please make sure to go to Twitter, follow both myself at DarkKnightNAT25 and at AJ's Comics, because those are the guys that make it possible for me to give you these comics every single week. They're my local comic book store. They're the place that I choose to spend, frankly, more money than I do on utilities every single week. So give them a look. One of the great things about the store, besides the people that work there, is your ability to do a mail-in subscription service where they send you your pull box. And if your order accumulates to $100 or more, there is absolutely no shipping. Best of all, no matter what, as long as you are a comic book pull box subscriber with them, you get a minimum of 10% off the entire store. Now, I don't know about you, but I love my comics, and I love them even more when I pay less for them and get the same quality. So make sure you check them out. Enter in to win this giveaway. Don't forget to like this video, comment down below answering the question of the day, subscribe to the channel, and please make sure to check them out on Twitter. Awesome folks. I just really want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I want to thank all of my subscribers and regular viewers for all the support you guys show me. It is so much appreciated, and it's really what makes uploading worthwhile. At the end of the day, I'm just a geek who loves to talk comic books, and if you guys want to see any more of that, feel free to click either one of the boxes above to be directed to one of our other videos. But thank you guys again, and this is going to be Dark Knight Nation signing out.